Hello and welcome back. Now that we have the index page, let's go ahead and add the Gravatar to it. I hope you're able to add an image to the Gravatar site associated with an email that you control. But first, we're going to check out how to add this to our site. So we'll go to our Rails console. So I had a console open from before. I'm just going to ensure it's still working with all the latest updates that we made. Okay, so from the Gravatar documentation, we can find that the Gravatar URLs, which is what we're going to use to show the images, are based on an MD5 hash. And it's an MD5 hash of the user's email address. In Ruby, the MD5 hash algorithm is implemented using the hex digest method. So let's try it out on the console. Okay, so let's say email bob@example.com. And if I type in email, okay, so to get the MD5 hash version of this, you can do something like this: digest, : MD5 in caps, : hex digest, and then email.downcase. Okay, if you hit return, there's the MD5 hash for the email address, which is bob@example.com. Okay, so this is what we're going to use in our method and append it to the URL. And that is how we're going to get the Gravatar for a user who has an email address saved at gravatar.com with an image associated with it. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the index.html.erb from recipes folder, from recipes view. Okay, so in the index.html erb file, we had left this section here that was open, and we're going to add the Gravatar to this section right here. Now, if you don't have your Rails server running, I would recommend go ahead and boot up the Rails server at this time. Okay, so we're going to add Gravatar 4 method, which we're going to define later on. Gravatar 4. This is a method that currently does not exist, so don't worry about it. And then we have a recipes object here, right? But it's going to be the chef associated with the recipe who has the username. So you're going to do something like this: recipe.chef to get the chef associated with the recipe. Okay. And then perhaps, whoops. H5, let's go with chef name, and then again recipe.chef.chef name. Now this code will only work because we have the association already built, okay? Otherwise this would have given an error. All right, and that should be good. At this time, our site will fail because we don't have this Gravatar 4 method. So let's go ahead and build this Gravatar 4 method. And one other thing I would like to add is I'm going to give this a size parameter because I want a default Gravatar size, and then I want the ability to change that size as I need based on where I put the Gravatar in the site. Okay, so now I'll just give it size 100. All right. So now let's build the Gravatar 4 method. So for methods that you are going to use, which will help in views, under views, you can put them in the application helper section. So under here, under app, here's this helper folder, and it comes with this default application helper over here. So what we can do is we can either add our code to the application helper, and that'll be available to all our views, or we can create a folder under helpers that, let's say this is recipes controller. If you want to restrict the availability of the helper method to just the views under the recipes folder, you can do that also. But for our application, I'm just going to add the method to the application helper over here. Okay. So the method name is Gravatar4. That's what we called it. And we're going to pass in a chef object. Now, here, we're going to give it the ability to take the size, and I'm also going to assign it a default size. So the default size, I'll say 80. All right. Now Gravatar ID, so let's assign a local variable, and we're going to set it to the method that we used here, which is this. So I'm just going to copy this over. So digest md5 : hex digest. Now email is not available right here because when we did it in the console, we had actually assigned an email. But to get the email here, you have a chef object, so it would be chef.email, and that'll give you the email address. Okay, so Gravatar ID. Now I'm going to assign the size. So if I pass in a size parameter, I want the size to be that. Gravatar. Now I'm going to construct the Gravatar URL using this Gravatar ID. Okay, so Gravatar URL, and this is available in the Gravatar website if you look for it in the Gravatar documentation. secure.gravatar.com/avatar/pound. This is when you say pound and open brace, you're basically passing in the variable, and the variable is this one, Gravatar ID. So Gravatar ID. Now if you weren't passing in the size option here, this would have been adequate, but since we're adding in the size, we're going to add a little bit to this. S equals pound, and then size, which we passed in right here. Okay. Now we'll create the image tag using this Gravatar URL. We'll give it an alt, so if it doesn't find the URL, it'll list the chef name. And we'll give it a class so we can add a bit of styling to it. Okay. Now that should work, so let's go ahead and try this on our site. Okay, great. So we see the avatar show up over here. Chef name Bob, because we associated it with bob@example.com. But notice how there's no image here. This is because bob@example.com does not have any associated images with that email address. That's why this showed up. And that's why it was important for you to create a test Gravatar account using an email address that you control, so you can use that over here, so you have your image show up. So I'm going to use my email address here. Okay, so in the Rails console, let's say recipe.first, So I'll go ahead and grab the first recipe. Okay, and we see that chef ID is 1. And let's say chef.all. We only have one chef, which is Bob. So I'm going to create another chef. Chef.create. And chef name, I'll give it my name. And then email, I'll give it my email address. Now what this will do is this will create a chef with my email address. And since I have an image, a gravatar associated with my email address, it should pick that up on the site. Okay, so now we have a second chef, Mashur. So I'm going to assign recipe.chef. Okay, and then recipe.save. Okay, so now if I type in recipe, I see that the chef ID has changed to 2, which is the chef I just created, which is Mashur. Okay, so let's see what happens to the gravatar this time. Okay, great. We see that the image associated with my gravatar account has now shown up here. And I hope you're able to do that and get your image up as well. So now we're going to add a little bit of styling to this. Okay. Now remember, in our app, we had given it the class of gravatar. So I'm going to go to the custom CSS SCSS page and add some styling for the gravatar class. And also in the index HTML page, if you saw that we gave it here a class of chef info, so I'll add some styling to that as well. So under app assets, if you go to custom css.scss, at the bottom under footer .chef underscore info, and here margin top 20 pixels. And I'm adding this because I want some room at the top over here, so this is more towards the middle. Okay, and I also want to add a border radius, so that I'll add to the gravatar. And here feel free to explore your own styling options that you'd like to pick. Border radius 10 pixels. Okay, great. So we see that we added a little bit of margin on top and also added the border radius to the image. Okay, now I think I want to add a line here. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. So in the index HTML, I'm going to over here after each row I will add an HR tag. That should work. Let me see how this looks. Okay, good. That's exactly what I was looking for. Actually, it looks like I added too much room over here because this is like going below this this show area for our recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and correct that. And so I'll decrease the margin on top from 20 to 10 pixels. Let's see what happens. Okay, much better. Okay, great. So we have the Gravatar added to our index page. And just to give you an example of what the size option does, here is the size that was set to 100, and we had set that here. If I go ahead and make this 200, notice how the image has resized. So that's why we added the size option. So at different areas of the site, we can basically use the size that's relevant to our application. So I'll move this back to 100. Okay, great. So in the next lesson, we're going to work on creating the view for viewing individual recipes. So right now, when you click on this, nothing happens. So we're going to work on the show recipe route. I'll see you there.